The U.S. government has given billions of dollars to businesses in an effort to curb the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The government will begin to pursue recouping these funds in 2021. Aggressive penalties will be imposed on companies that do not follow regulations and guidelines for proper use of these funds. Criminal charges are already being levied on fraudulent use. Don't suffer again. Get a customized business operations success suite from Elite 8 Tax and Financial Services for your company today. BOSS packages include entity formation, payroll, accounting and bookkeeping, tax planning, tax filings, and quarterly strategy sessions to minimize your tax liability, increase efficiency, and maximize your profits. Make your appointment today at elite8financial.com. Get the guidance, tools, and protection your business needs now. Get BOSS. Get behind the shield.
Welcome to Boss Talk Radio. We're going to go right into our tax tips for today. I am seeing a lot of procrastination in the market. Guys, do not pay unnecessary fines and penalties and unnecessary interest for a delay in filing your tax return and or filing an extension. And I know some confusion was caused by the federal extension for the individual deadline. So if you're part of a partnership, and/or an S-corp, you are already behind the curveball and have some fines to pay. We can give you some relief to that. Please reach out to us if you have any questions about your corporate tax return as far as a partnership and/or a S-corp return. Then understand that C corporations, your return was due last week. That was not extended by the federal extension to May 17th. May 17th. The exception to that rule is if you were in Texas, Oklahoma, or Louisiana. Then you still have to June 15th. There's some ambiguity about whether or not that includes C corporations. Definitely did not include S-corps and partnerships. So guys, please get on the ball with that. Reach out to us, 866-2ELITE8. That's 866-235-4838. Or you can visit our website, elite8financial.com/appointments, and book a consultation there for your upcoming tax needs. Also, if you have some past year tax returns, I've seen a lot of questions regarding, okay, well, do I get stimulus money? Do I qualify for PPP? Do I qualify for EIDL? This is another example of being reactionary in the market versus being proactive. Especially as a business owner, if you're keeping up with your normal essential records anyway, then almost guaranteed you would qualify. There was not a whole lot for you to have to do. You would have had your documents ready to go at the time it was time to submit those. If you did not have those, understand that you can't approach your accounting and tax professionals so late, so in the dents of the season, and think that's going to be a quick turnaround. It's not going to happen. If you can get those types of things turned around to you by midsummer, that's really expeditious. So keep that in mind. And the PPP deadline was extended, I believe, to the end of May. I'll have to go back and check that. If you guys watched my seminar for the U.S. Black Chamber of Commerce, we went all over the American Rescue Plan and talked about those different things. And we're going to get into some more of that on today's show. But I really wanted to come to you guys and let you know, with the deadline coming up so quickly, and it may not look like it's quick to you. You're thinking, okay, well, May 17th, I have a few weeks. Give your tax professionals time to really, really work for you. May 17th is not the date to get it to them. I mean, if you don't have it to them already, you're kind of behind the ball, but you definitely want to get it to them in the next week, really by the end of the month or whatever. Some people have a little bit more flexibility. You can go a little bit longer. I know our firm, effective May 17th, we're going into rush fees, and anything that's not inclusive of the rush fees, we're going to file an extension for. So be mindful of that. Take care of your tax professionals, and it's okay to give your tax professional a tip for all the tips we give you. Be back after this.
So one of the questions was, how is our experience in comparison to with Elite 8 in comparison to other tax professional services? And I think I'll just kind of turn that over to my husband and what he would think.
Being from the military services, during the past, I would always use a online service throughout the military. And one thing I didn't like about it is not able to speak to someone live. And since I've been with Elite 8, having that person live in front of me has been great rewarding. If me and my wife had to recommend Elite 8 to a family or friend, one of the strong attributes would be competence. As a leader in the United States military, I've always been competent. And since my post-retirement, when I'm utilizing a business, I want to make sure they're competent in their answers and their tax preparation.
Get behind the shield.
Welcome to Boss Talk Radio, the #1 online business and entrepreneurial talk show. Brought to you by Elite 8 Tax and Financial Services.
Boss Talk Radio, keeping it real, yeah, that's for sure. I said a Boss Talk Radio, here for your needs, we'll crack the code. He the boss.
He gon' fix your situation like there ain't no time for wasting. We ain't playing when we saying
He the boss.
And if you ever have a problem, he gon' show you how to solve it. Listen in and he'll show you he the boss.
Talk
Here's your host, the sexy tax expert, George Dandridge.
Boss Talk Radio, here for your needs, we'll crack the code. He the boss.
Welcome to another episode of Boss Talk Radio. I am your host, George Dandridge Jr. I am an enrolled agent, and what I do for you is solve tax problems. Boss, business operations success strategies is what we do to keep your business compliant and in line with compliance. Our guest today is our favorite HR specialist, Miss Selina Thomas of 6 Degrees HR Consulting. And we're going to talk about, we're going to go a little bit more in depth about the family sick leave and, Sick and Family Leave Act that had some changes done in the American Rescue Plan. So if you're a business owner, you have payroll, you definitely want to tune into today's episode because there is some opportunities of exposure, some things you really need to be aware of and be in compliance with. So we're going to get into that right after this.
This is Dr. Tamia Gass with Rejuvenating Chiropractic.
This is Nara Reed with Modified Nutrition Health Coach.
This is Karen Marcel with June Street Barbershop.
This is Tiffany Marcel with Marcel Luxury Realty, and you're listening to Boss Talk Radio.
I paid the call to be born.
Why buy pieces to the puzzle when you can purchase a proven system for less? Elite 8 Tax Pro Solutions was perfected from errors. Now you can eliminate the learning curve by simply following our proven system for success. You'll benefit from brand recognition, success coaches, cloud-based software, award-winning marketing strategies, and more. Get out of that boring job and create the freedom you want with a proven company. Go to ElitePTS.com to see customized options and get started now.
Knowledge, integrity, security, service. Get behind the shield.
Finding your brand space in this ever-changing economy can be challenging to new and established businesses. Graphic Line Media can help launch your business's brand potential to unknown places with creative revisioning that relentlessly presses the competition. From graphic design, web, print, apparel, media, and social, we have something designed to grow your business. Don't hesitate. Rule your space. Visit Graphic Line Media at graphiclinemedia.com or join our Facebook page at Graphic Line Media to get special discounts and offers.
Bear with me, guys. I've just been made aware that one of the streaming places has some difficulty. So while we're dealing with that, I'm going to have Miss Selina Thomas come on and introduce herself, tell you what it is that she does. You may have remembered from a past episode. She's going to tell you about herself and her company. Hey, Selina, how you doing?
Hi, good morning. Hi, how are you? Nice to see you again.
I'm doing well. Go ahead and tell everyone about yourself and your business while I attempt to fix this here connection thing.
Sure. Yes, I know we have a lot of kinks that we work out. So my name is Selina Thomas. I'm the owner of 6 Degrees HR Consulting, and essentially I provide, or 6 Degrees provides outsourced HR consulting to small to medium-sized companies. And so, as George mentioned earlier, the infrastructure of a company is so important, along with all the compliance issues from tax to employee matters. You have to have a specialist engaged in that, or as he mentioned, you could be behind the 8 ball and not focused on the growth and focused on the crisis. And so I'm here to mitigate that for you and, of course, keep you current. So there's been a lot that's happened since COVID, and it's so important that you have a specialist that's responsible for making sure you understand that and stay compliant with it. So 6 Degrees HR Consulting, and I do practice nationally. So I'm based in California, but I was actually just in Texas not too long ago, and work remotely like everyone else. So whatever you need, 6 Degrees is here to help you.
Now, this is like really important, guys. I want you to understand that, because if you are a small business owner that has, 3, 20, 50 employees, and you may be using a third-party payroll provider versus having an in-house payroll team and or HR person, that third-party payroll provider is not obligated to keep you informed about these different types of changes and everything. And some of you are kind of, flying by the seat of your pants as it relates to HR issues. So, Selina, tell us some of the things that business owners can be exposed of with some of these recent changes, especially.
Yes, the rescue plan evolved from the CARES Act, the FFRCA plan. So I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that payroll is separate from HR. I liken it to payroll being the right side of the brain and HR being the left, and you need both. And so they work, they're intertwined, but they do have different specialty to the relationship with the employee. So the employee side, when you're talking about the relationship, the hiring, the life cycle of an employee, from reviews to disciplinary actions and to the separation, that's all part of the HR side. The payroll is the numbers and the taxes related to payroll and or garnishments. We have people that have child support orders. If someone sends that to my office, I send it to the payroll company. If someone sends and needs something from the employee's file as it relates to discipline, time off requests, like the paid sick time mandates that are all kind of bundled up in that rescue plan, that comes to my office. So with respect to the recent changes in the rescue plan, those evolved from the original stimulus when the crisis first happened. And we started to see that the amount that was given, the time off that was given, and even the PPP numbers that were given, we're going to cut it because the crisis went longer than the original plan. If you remember, and I think early people could remember it, oh, we'll just give you 12 weeks worth of payroll under that first round. And of course, now we're a whole year later. And so they had to do a second round. But that second round also had to negotiate the time off for employees if they were impacted by COVID, whether individually or someone within their orbit, a family member. They had to take, we have people that are long haulers that have COVID symptoms long after that 14 days that's typical. Those are the types of issues that had to be negotiated into the rescue plan because we still have people that are impacted by this. And so the rescue plan continued to extend the date of that FFRCA. First, it was extended to April 1. Now it's extended through September. And so an employer in this particular section of the rescue plan has the discretion versus in the first round, it was mandatory. So there's a difference. So when you're using that discretion, you have to be specific as to who you give it to and why, and you have to be deliberate in the reason why maybe you denied it. I have a lot of lawsuits happening because I work collaboratively with employment attorneys that are saying an employer chose to give it to one group of people and not another group, but they had no reason as to why they denied it for one. This is after they were given the choice. And so now that's causing litigation. So the trend is happening now that some people were denied the COVID relief pay and some were given it. And so you have to be very careful in that process of issuing it in the first place. That's where specialist comes in. We create the standard operating procedure as it relates to that, albeit it's only going to go through in September. You still have to have it. So I hope that kind of clarifies, but it is a lot to unpack, and it would really be important to kind of make that call and make sure that you're doing it right.
It's definitely a lot to unpack. As I was preparing for my speech about federal tax updates with the U.S. Black Chamber, where I spent the largest 2 parts of time at was dealing with the sick and family medical leave and the employee retention credit, because as I was going through those, it just kept feeling like I was missing this bridge where this thing kind of overlaps. And I was like, this is going to be problems because it's like, okay, it's in this bill. The complete bill hadn't been ratified yet, but then it was set to take effect on April 1st.
And now you have to comply.
And I was like, a lot of people are going to miss this. And it's not surprising to what you were saying, that we're having this litigation kick up. We live in a very litigious society now.
And try California, the most litigious state, right? In our country.
Oh my God, I can imagine. And so one of the things that stood out, and I didn't spend a lot of time there with it, so I wanted you to come on to be able to speak about that, was, and you kind of touched on it just now. I want to go a little bit deeper into that, but it's basically a discrimination claim.
Potentially,
and you have to be, and it's specific in the bill that you cannot discriminate if you opt in for this sick leave and everything. So you can put yourself at a huge risk there. Then one of the other changes was in the first bill, as you mentioned, the first, I think it was 12 or 14 days or something like that, was unpaid. And now, well, number one, the cycle of time has restarted as of April 1. And
so let me help you with that one, because I want to clarify, it doesn't give an additional 80 hours. So if they exhausted it in the first round, so there's a lot of confusion about that. This is if it had not been used by that individual. So it doesn't reset the button and give them an additional 80 hour. It extends their eligibility to use the 80 hours. And so there was some confusion about, oh, well, this person exhausted it in the first 6 months of COVID, and now they have another scenario, COVID related, and they're asking to use the FFRDA, thinking that this reset that you just described gives them an additional 80. It does not. It gives them the opportunity to use any residual amount that they have not, because remember, it's an incremental benefit. Incremental meaning they used 20 over there in May of last year, and they've got 60 hours left. They still have the opportunity to use that through the end of September 2021 and to total 80 hours. So that's really important because we've had people, and there's also been, separate from the discrimination side, on the other side of that, people using it, inappropriately or requesting it inappropriately, wanting to take a vacation. No, listen, the world has opened up again, and now people are like, I'm cashing in on that. And that's the other part of this bill that is really frustrating on the employer side, because they see a trend with people who they know aren't sick, or this is where we're able to ask for supporting documentation like a COVID positive test and be able to validate being able to give them that. So that's the reason why it's so confusing, because when we spoke the last time, I think we described it, it's like building a ship while you're trying to fly it and hoping you land on Mars, right? You're like, hopefully lands. Right.
I couldn't have said that one better myself, because,
like that.
In our spaces, people expect us to know. The minute they see it on the news, they just expect us to know. And the reality is that when you see it, oftentimes it's like we only hear a buzz, but the government haven't figured out how they're going to do what they said yet.
Now, how do we implement it? So that's
right.
That's the best way I can describe it, because, if you read it, even the portion that applies to our scope of practice, it's 5,000 pages.
Mm-hmm.
And then try to apply that nationally. And then you have some that are specific to your state. So we had some mandates come out of California, then the federal mandate. And some of them overlapped, and that was great. Then some of them were just indicative of that state only. Then you take it down further to county, then you take it down to city. So you can imagine, as you said when we first saw each other, I've been busy because COVID is confusing, and the things that are tied with it to comply with just supporting people, which is what we all ask for. But we do, as specialists, have to be able to sort through the details, give ourselves some grace to understand it in application and implementation, and then apply it accordingly. So the courts have given some grace for that in the recent litigation that I've seen, in allowing people to go to arbitration and say, listen, I think you guys can work this out, knowing that the employer had no bad intentions. It might have been an interpretation issue, things like that. Because, people will park at Superior Court to sue quick. And some people want an employer to make up for their losses in 2020 with litigation. And that's just the reality.
One of the things that I found was that a lot of businesses did not touch the employee retention credit out of absolute
surprising
analysis paralysis. They were like, I'm scared of this.
Right.
So I went into that and I tried to clear it up a bit, because there's now a push from the government for people to take advantage of that. And there's still more questions than answers. Some of the questions that I've gotten that I'd like for you to kind of go into is people are trying to understand what they can and cannot ask for from an employee that does not want to come back to work due to COVID, or they have a kid. And I saw this, and it was just, like you said, a lot to unpack. Yeah. So some of the key changes was these three, that people can be off if they're obtaining a COVID vaccine, recovering from illness or condition related to the COVID vaccine. This is
Side
not
effects.
actually having it. This is just the vaccine.
Side effects,
Or
right.
they're awaiting results from the COVID-19 vaccine, even if the employer is requesting it. There was like, I read that and I was like, there's some
Oh my
lawyers
gosh.
kicking their heels right
Oh,
now.
yeah.
This is going to get sexy.
There's
Talk
lawyers
to us
that I
about
know.
that.
You're so right, George. There's lawyers that I know that literally rebranded their practice to focus on COVID litigation, which is astonishing. That was you.
No, I'm here. So,
Here we go.
what?
Yeah, there's lawyers that I know that rebranded their practice to specialize specifically in COVID litigation. And you see it now. Were you made to work during COVID? Were you forced to provide supporting documentation? You may have a claim. Like you starting to see that trend. And so I like it to like ambulance chasers. Like they know now there's going to be some missteps by employers because it was so difficult to interpret. So one of the things that we couldn't do years before COVID, and you probably know this, you know, medical information is protected under HIPAA. But now, because we have a public health crisis and we have this relief act that says we can ask for supporting documentation to pay you, which means I can ask for that COVID test, which is a medical documentation, right? It's got the results of a medical test. Whereas 2 years ago, I couldn't ask for that. But to support this time off request and pay you under this CARES Act, I have the right to have it. Now, the parameters about making sure you don't share it and say, okay, Joe has COVID, the person's just off and you have to pay him and it has to go sealed. It's a lot.
So where's that protection for the business owner? Because one of the underlying currents that I see happening next is this, and this is what everybody was kind of scared of. Like if we open that can of worms, would employers then be able to say, we require you to know if you've gotten the vaccine in order to come
Return to
in?
work. So here's a couple of things. So first, there is no mandate, federal or in any state, individually, that mandates that an employer can tell an employee they have to get the shot. Because remember, vaccines are always voluntary. You've got people that can return to school and they're not required to have it as long as they have the precautions, social distance, the mask, hand washing. So that's one thing. The other thing is that if you look, and again, we're still sifting through the 5,000 pages that apply to us, but in the Relief Act, there is what's called a liability shield. And if you remember, the hang up in passing the entire package was because of the liability shield for the employer, specifically because they forecasted that the one trend that would happen as a result of this was that people were going to sue employers. So employers and lobbyists for employers and unions said, we need a liability shield in this act so that people, and this is not just employers, institutions like schools, hospitals, need to have.
We lost you on sound, Selena. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, we got you
Can
back.
you hear me?
We missed that last part. Can we go back a little bit?
Sure. Yes. So the liability shield was negotiated in the stimulus package. And that was really one of the hangups at the end of it. If you remember, people constantly talked about why have we not passed this yet? And that was because there were a lot of arguments back and forth about how much time an employer can be protected under the liability shield. It went from 3 to 5 years. Now it's 5 years. And so what's going to happen was in some of these actions against employers is that they will be able to cite that area of the stimulus package and say, we're protected under the liability shield. We are working and existing like everyone else within COVID, within a pandemic. That is a once in a century situation, and we cannot be held liable for that or the impact from that. And so that was so important because at the end of the day, we've got this long line of people saying, I need somebody to make up for my losses. And who better than my employer who I perceive to have deep pockets. So that's important that we get to that place to understand that we have protections as employees and as employers.
Let's talk about this because I know it doesn't exist at this very moment. I just anticipate it going there, where to some degree vaccines are going to be imposed, where there's going to be some wording where it's not mandated, but it's imposed. Whereas, okay, no, you don't have to get it, but you can't do this, or this without
and
it.
you can't come in here. You can't come into this venue. So I'm already starting to see here in California that certain venues actually have, it's going to be 2 layers. And so just forecasting that it'll head into Texas, but SoFi Stadium, the newest, latest, greatest stadium in the NFL where the Rams play, they have a barcode that you can take that shot record and it authenticates it, by the way, because it's tied to health. There's a barcode on the back of that shot card. You zap it and it shows your identity and says this person is immunized. Counter to that, if you're someone that's coming to try to get into that Rams game, you're like, I chose not to get the shot, then they're going to say, here's the line for a rapid test. Step over there, take your rapid test, and now you can enter. So it's going to look like that. It's not going to be a mandate per se, but it's going to be an alternative to determine, because of public health, which version are you? Are you the one that is COVID negative and you can get in? Or are you the one that has the immunization? So that's what it'll look like. And it will probably trickle down to employers, because now we have this new technology that is rapid testing. So if I'm that person that doesn't want to get the shot, I'll take the rapid test. So that's how they do it.
Okay, I'm going to make everybody uncomfortable right now and ask this question, because there's 2 parts to this question, actually. So one is, have we basically, without admitting it, thrown away the concept of HIPAA and people are going to know whether or not you took the shot or the vaccination? That's part one. And then 2, have we involuntarily circumvented the Constitution in a way that we're just going to disregard religious beliefs or any other
personal preference? Right.
Yeah. Okay. So, and
just keeping it really simple. That's a personal preference. Right.
What happens with that for an employer? Because one of the things that a lot of my clients are telling me right now is that really almost every business owner that I serve are having challenges equipping their staff. Like, people don't want to come to work, basically. And the government has basically made it to where, you're better off sitting at home. So my question goes back to, okay, when all of this expires, and we're probably looking at September where, the Band-Aid is ripped off and we have to deal with this. What does that look like?
In California, it's June. It's June 15th.
It's June. Okay.
So opened for California. The governor announced June 15th, life is back. Now think about that. That's a month and a half away, essentially. And there's been no kind of, titrating, if you will, weaning of what we're currently doing now to suddenly back to normal. So that is very abrupt, to your point. Even September would be abrupt if you think about it.
That's what I'm thinking. And I'm like, okay, what does that look like for employers? How much do they have to spend to be able to consistently provide rapid tests, to be able to capture the technology to read scanners for these cards and validate them?
Temperature check you, sure.
There's so much more to deal with this. And at the end of the day, it seems as if personal preference and personal regard is a thing of the past.
It's out the door. It's so imposing, and that's one thing that an employer is doing their best not to be in the age of litigation. And of course, there's a balance to how much you even want to know as an employer, because as much as you collect, as much as you're exposed to. So think about that. I have to collect someone's medical records, and now I have an exposure because what if that's done wrong? And because I just, that's not my area. I don't know how to maintain medical records. I'm not a clinical environment. I'm a painting company. And so the less an employer has to do in terms of this crisis, the better. But the problem is they can't do less when you have a public health crisis. So that's why it's so important to kind of isolate it to the specific industry. So let's just talk about it. Let's just take an industry for an example, because you have to part and parcel it out. You have OSHA that has an interest, which is safety for everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
OSHA gets to dictate to you as a regulating agency what safety plan you have to have in place. And it's called a COVID prevention plan. That means we're doing everything we can in our environment and our type of industry to mitigate the spread of COVID. So if I'm a painting company and I have painters that work in the public and they work with customers and they work in their homes and work on industrial commercial locations, they're coming into contact with people. So now I have to have a plan for how they are interacting and doing the job at the same time. That means OSHA gets to tell me I have to make sure that even in this COVID, post-COVID era, they wear a mask, they're socially distant, they have to wash their hands, they have to take time off if they feel they've been exposed. So it's going to come down to the industry that you're in, which is going to be very important because some have more contact than others. Think about the chaos that schools are going through between being a school district and working with students.
Oh, I'm seeing that firsthand.
Chaos.
My educators are frustrated, which actually introduces another point.
Sure.
I've seen some companies speak to not allowing employees to continue to work from home, whereas other ones have seen the efficacy of having people work from home. But when you mention the schools, there's that integrated challenge of if you force parents to return to work, like physically go to work at a time where kids weren't physically able to go to school, is there some type of
and they fall under the CARES Act.
there?
They're supported. Right. And so there's two sides to that. And you're exactly right. Some employers have said, you know what, like Twitter, just stay home indefinitely. There's no reason for us to have this big building, house people in a really small area when we figured out how to do this efficiently and effectively remotely. So some have seen the cost benefit to that. And of course, just aligning with the fact that people still do genuinely have a fear of COVID. So that supports that concern for their employees, and they don't have to address it any further because they're working remotely. And some industries can do that. The tech industry and people have figured out how to change their services and everything is remote. With schools and people returning to schools and being forced to then have a plan to support their kids in school or support the kids that don't go to school, because there's hybrid now. Even schools have said, hey, you know what? If you don't want to return, you will be, my kids are in school now, they're online, but there are students on campus now that have opted to return for the social engagement or for whatever reason. So now you've got two types of students. You've got an in-person student and you've got that hybrid student that's on the screen. And so everyone's making an adjustment and allowing for what that looks like as things evolve out of this crisis and into herd immunity. But I do think prediction-wise that you'll still have companies and institutions that will continue to do things remotely because it's just working, it's cost effective, and who knows when the next scenario like this will happen. Who wants to reset that and get back to normal just to have to go back in again? because that's the other fear, is that this is just our first taste of it, which is why we're calling it once in a century kind of circumstances. But I think you would be naive to believe that this could never happen again. We were naive to believe that it could never happen at all. And now we know better. Now we're like, this could happen, right? A year ago, we were like, what happened? Now we're like, this could happen. And I want to make sure that whatever I'm doing in my life or business, I could still be functioning.
So, in effect, wouldn't businesses reduce the exposure of litigation by continuing to allow those non-essential personnel to work remotely? So, I mean, what is the?
This is the reason why some of them are embracing it.
So why are we seeing some of these companies saying,
do that.
"Hey, no, you're going to definitively come back on this date, and this is what it is"? Why are we seeing that? Like, why would they?
It could be the industry. It could be the industry.
Okay.
It could be the industry. It could be that this is not the type of industry that could allow for that. Hospitality and restaurants. We can't do that remotely. So we're talking about industries that can do it and figure out how to do it. And then there are certain industries that this is just by virtue of what we do, an in-person, face-to-face situation. Salons, hotel, hospitality, resorts. I mean, people are traveling again. And so we can't have certain types of employees, which we saw what they were called during the COVID. They're essential workers. They're the ones that are out. UPS, all of our delivery services, which the uptick was 3,000%. So there are some, so they have to make a hard line because of the industry. And then the other ones have the flexibility not to have to do that because, I have people that I've provided services to them even before COVID, and I've never met them in person, just simply because of the industry that they're in and the fact that I can provide them support remotely without ever having. I have a doctor in New York. I met him. I've had him for 5 years. I met him for the first time last year, ironically during COVID because he was out here. But you can do it. So the hard line is because of the type of work that you do. Law enforcement, nurses. There's just some things that you just can't replace face to face.
Absolutely.
And that's the reason why.
Do you? I think that COVID exposed a lot of weaknesses in systemic infrastructure across the board, but especially in government. And while they probably did their best to kind of keep up and, adjust along the way, I think we can all agree that for the largely it was an epic fail. But again, like you said, this is a once in a century thing. Do you anticipate the role of FEMA kind of changing to adopt for stuff like this, working collegiately with the CDC and OSHA,
public health,
to put a complete plan in place? Because it was almost as if these agencies had these kind of tiered, non-communicative structures, and so everybody was like, "Who do we turn to?"
Well, we learned a lot from that, but I want to go back further. If you think about 9/11, and you think about the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing, and a lot of things spawned from that, and in terms of just the Patriot Act and how money was tracked and how two entities, if they were collaborative and communicative, they were more effective and efficient in getting ahead of issues. So we learned that at 9/11, but that was, again, another crisis that broadsided us, and we were like, we would have never expected that to ever happen. And yet, not only are we 20 years later and we fully anticipate it, fast forward, we had a plan in place for a pandemic. If you remember, Obama had created one, and this second administration after him, I won't name, but they ripped it up, right? But there was the concept of having a collaboration between public health, CDC, forecasting and projecting so that it could be isolated quickly, a pandemic or a super virus. And the science behind that was also involved with CC. But when you rip that up, which is kind of the playbook that we could have used, and now we know we have to have a playbook. We have to have that collaborative engagement between those agencies that could trigger a shutdown quickly, isolate the area, be effective about like really making sure it doesn't spread. Because we were so far behind the 8 ball, by that time that people really began to take it serious, we had hundreds of thousands of people that died, businesses destroyed, and the recovery, which is why we have this rescue plan in place, which ultimately could have been unnecessary had we been more collaborative and prepared. So I think now they don't have a choice. We're going to have leadership that is committed to the unknown, right? And these are scenarios that we don't want to think are going to happen, but we need to anticipate that they will. So I just think we as individuals now are like, we have to expect unexpected just because of what it did to us in our businesses.
A lot of business owners were surprised by the fact that their business insurances, they thought they had more since they didn't only have liability and they had all of these different types of, bells and whistles. They were very surprised they were very surprised to find that this didn't fall under that engagement. What would your advice be on situations like that?
I work with a lot of brokers, and I think that's such a great question because even the insurance industry is trying to sort out what is the exclusion or the language for this. So you're going to have two things. You're either going to have an exclusion to a pandemic or you're going to have language for a pandemic as an underwriter in creating the policy. And so you check that box and saying, no, I don't believe there'll be a pandemic. And so I don't need coverage under my EPLI insurance for that would cover my employees. They didn't even have the language written. And so when I talk to brokers that I work with, they didn't have that. It was one of those things that can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. It was one of those things that wasn't even written. So the insurance industry is changing the language now and trying to figure out where does that fall under. Is it fall under EPLI? Where in the workers' comp does it fall? Because if they get exposure at work, there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, again, everyone was broadsided by this, but I think there's no one coming out of it that doesn't think that, one, it'll happen again, and two, they have to have some sort of process for it when it does. And insurance is absolute for employers. And so they have to consider what does that look like when they're underwriting it and industry-wise. Because you have more prevalence in one industry versus another. If you're working remotely, you're not going to check that box because people aren't around each other. But if you have a school or a business where people are face-to-face, it's going to be when you check the box.
Right, so it's going to be how they basically rate you or grade you based on the industry. Exactly. I'm sure the exclusion, and this is what is going to for some reason end up in court, and I think it's a slam dunk that the insurance company is going to win on this because, as you keep saying, it's a once in a century. But a lot of people that had business interruption coverage thought that they should be compensated, and like, no, So
well, they'll say simply, we didn't have that coverage and anticipate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because in insurance, the big thing to insurance is that you don't expect everything to happen everywhere at the same time. That's how they remain profitable and whatnot. So,
assessing risk. That's what they do. They assess the risk.
I had a question about the California thing because this gets into the kind of back to the state versus federal element. When you said that for California, this is June. So is that to suggest that this sick and family leave coverage that was extended through September by the federal government doesn't apply to California employers?
No, it does. It does. It's two different things. the state is reopened June 15th in terms of no
Okay.
limitations to capacity in restaurants and amusement parks and things like that. So those are the restrictions being lifted on June 15th. But the federal always trumps the state in anything. So the federal, in terms of that rescue plan, is still applicable.
Okay, gotcha. That makes more
Mm-hmm.
sense to me now. I was like, wait a minute, because California is kind of known
It's
for
just that
saying,
we're open now.
they're known for
Yes.
saying, well, we ain't dealing with the shut up.
Yes.
They do what they want to do.
Yes, exactly.
I wanted to
Traditionally, yes.
congratulate you on a very big and busy year. You were one of the
Thank
people
you.
that got into the political arena. I applaud you for that. We've had so many
Thank you.
guests and associates really take the shoulder, take responsibility or take action upon themselves and really go after trying to be the change they wanted to see. And I couldn't be more proud of you guys, proud of all of you. The list is so long, but I have you here right now. And I wanted to tell you that we were very proud to see that. And
it's funny. I had someone ask me the other day if I wanted to continue to pursue public office, and absolutely, because I jumped in during a crisis to be a part of the recovery, and we'll still be in that recovery mode in 2022, which is the next cycle for the particular seat that I was running for. And so you're kind of the first to hear it that I am running again in 2022, and I'm taking the things that I learned in that first campaign and all the things that I've done since to apply that to my candidacy. And so Caitlyn Jenner announced it today. She's running for governor here in California. And so I'll announce today too, I'm running for city council 2022. Santa Clarita.
All right. Awesome. That is awesome. You heard it here first on Boss Talk Radio.
Yay. You heard it here
let
first.
us know if there's any support we can offer. And for those people that are really kind of dancing around with the no skirt on as far as HR goes, how can they reach you?
Sure. Absolutely. So 6degreeshrconsulting.com is the quickest way. And then, of course, you can Google Selina Thomas and all of my content comes up. And there's always the how to connect to me in that content. And you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram. So Selina Thomas on Facebook, and then vote for Selina Thomas. Vote for Selina Thomas on Instagram.
Thank you so much for coming back in today and clearing up some of this ambiguity, because your section was 5,000 pages. We're not going to even talk about the consequences of my side of things.
Good luck with that, George. God bless you.
We'll be dealing. I told someone this. Me and one of my colleagues were talking the other day, and I told them we'll be dealing with the results of the 2020 tax year well into 2029. It's
Absolutely.
just, and I anticipate that while I had the bulk of the changes and whatnot in this current year, I anticipate that industries like your own, the policymakers, are really going to have so much come about every passing year to kind of shore this thing up. But I want to encourage people to be a part of that process, share your experiences and whatnot, and the challenges that you have, because one of the things I hate to hear is they should fix this. You are the they. So
yes,
get
and be
involved.
engaged. I think that's such a great point, George. And don't get towed along, and because policy changes when people use their voice. And so the only way, if it's not suiting you or your industry, that you can be a part of just even it being heard, is to open your mouth and do it with purpose. Do your research, always be engaged in what the latest, greatest information is for you, which is what you and I are charged with based on our licenses. But I tell people, don't wait until the licensed person is available to you, or, you have a tax notice or a notice of hearing, because by then, you're behind the 8 ball. And so it's important to be a part of that. I hate for anyone to have a dream like a business, that dream go away behind liability that they could have avoided by being engaged.
Yes. I can't scream that loud enough. Give that woman a megaphone.
Yes, exactly. It's always great to see you.
You as well. Continue to do big things. Congratulations on the new home to come and everything.
Thank you.
We're excited for you.
Yes,
You've been tuned in to Boss Talk Radio. We will see you guys on Monday for Monday's Motivation. See you soon.
Have a great weekend.
Boss Talk Radio, keeping it real, yeah, that's for sure. I said a Boss Talk Radio, here for your needs, we'll crack the code. He the boss, ooh, he the boss, ooh, yeah, boss, he's the boss, he the boss, he the boss.